Hello everyone. In this video we're going to talk about the New Year resolutions and specifically about the resolution trap, which consists of the disappointment cycle, the dopamine trap, and the what the hell effect. And then we're going to discuss the protocol strategy, how to set a floor, not a ceiling, never miss twice rule, and a start to the blueprint. Let's go. Nearly 9 out of 10 people who try it every single year statistically fail. It really is an annual ritual of self-improvement that almost always transforms into a cycle of self-defeat. And it's something we just accept. It's the annual confidence trick we play on ourselves. We engage in this collective delusion that the simple turning of a page in a calendar is enough to override months or even years of ingrained habits. I recently had this moment that started this entire video idea. I was checking my notes and I found my resolution list from the last year. Start a YouTube channel, get 6 pack abs, master speaking Romanian, wake up at 6 a.m. daily. And it didn't feel like a sudden burst of motivation. I just felt this wave of profound, immediate annoyance at my past self. That's a crucial distinction. The list, instead of being an inspiration, it becomes a record of promises broken. And when we look at the data, the story is brutally consistent. We aren't talking a marginal misses here. Research shows that roughly 92% of people who set these resolutions have quit, failed, or completely abandoned their goals by the time February rolls around. This is a statistical certainty of failure, not an anomaly. And that failure, that constant repeated disappointment, is the focus of our mission today. We are treating this recurring failure not as a personal moral defect, that we are lazy or we lack motivation, but as a systematic technical breakdown, a bug in the system. We need to find a protocol to replace this deeply flawed tradition. Why do highly intelligent functional adults, people who manage complex jobs, families, finances, why do we constantly fall for the same trap? Is it a failure addiction or is it a deeper mechanism? We trained in every other area of life to learn from failure, yet here we repeat the exact same template, big, abstract, high-stake goals, and expect a different outcome. It's a definition of insanity. It is. We assume the fault lies within us, but our deep dive into the sources suggests that the culprit isn't simply laziness. It's a profound conflict between our immediate biology and our flawed psychological framing of our success. We set up this entire cycle based on a catastrophic premise. We binge, we relax, we overindulge in December, relying entirely on a mythical, disciplined entity we call future me to take the reins on January 1st, and that future me is a delusion. That version of you is theoretically endowed with unlimited willpower, perfect discipline, but the person who actually wakes her up on January 2nd is the same tired, habit-driven human who just spent the last 2 weeks reinforcing exactly the opposite behaviors. So there is a huge disconnection, a profound cognitive dissonance. We're setting up a clash between the planning self and the doing self, and that the doing self is frankly guaranteed to lose. We need to pull apart the cognitive dissonance. This isn't about blaming ourselves, it's about fixing the internal programming. Let's start by examining the statistical and psychological timeline of failure. Section 1. The annual line of failure cycle. Okay, so when we talk about the resolution cycle, we have to confront the statistical timeline. It's pretty grim. The enthusiasm peak is New Year's Eve, followed by commitment peak around January 4th. Then the drop-off begins. It's fast. By January 15th, often referred as a Blue Monday, a significant portion of resolutions have already been abandoned. And by the end of months, 9 out of 10 people are right back where they started. So January 1st, for most of us, is just start of a disappointment countdown. And that high energy during the planning stage, that's part of the problem, right? We sit there full of possibilities, setting these monumental, almost heroic goals. We completely ignore the reality of our past performance. The audacity of declaring, I will read 50 books when you know you fell asleep reading a dedication of the last book you pick up, it's astounding, yet we all do it. And this is where we need to dig deeper in the future of my fallacy and more depths. It's a form of what psychologists call temporal discounting. Okay, what does it mean is a simple term. It means the planning self is completely detached from the reality of the required effort. The person writing the list is emotionally and physically comfortable, projecting an idealized self who will somehow thrive under pressure. They discount the pain, the friction, then inevitable setbacks, and the sheer boredom of repetitive action. So the planning self operates under the illusion of infinite willpower, but the doing self is still a creature of habit and convenience. When the alarm goes off at 6 a.m. on the cold, dark morning, the doing self is confronted with the massive physical and psychological cost of the goal, and that cost immediately outweighs the abstract distinct benefit of the six-pack abs or the 50 books. The benefit feels a million miles away, and the pain is right here, right now. The brain is inherently lazy, in the sense that it's engineered for efficiency and conservation of energy. It always off the path of least resistance. So the planning self is essentially writing checks that the doing self motivation account just cannot cash. The reality of the difficulty immediately clashes with the fantasy of effortless transformation. I think we need to linger here for a moment on the societal ritual itself. Why do we keep participating, knowing the outcome? It feels like we are drawn to the emotional high of the fresh start. The clean slate, even if the slate goes smashed instantly, because the ritual provides a momentary escape from guilt. December is often characterized as by indulgence. The resolution allows us to psychologically clear the ledger. It's a get out of a jail free card for December. I eat poorly for a month, but it's okay because future me will be a disciplined vegetarian who jogs daily. It's an intoxicating form of psychological debt forgiveness. What the debt isn't forgiven, it's merely deferred, and it comes due with interest. And when future me inevitably fails, the present self experience the shame, reinforcing the cycle. And that's the loop. Guilt leads to overplanning, which leads to failure, which leads to more guilt. We are engaging in behavior that, if applied to financial investment, constantly buying highly volatile stocks that immediately fall, would be considered completely irrational. Yet we do it with our personal identity every single year. It's the ultimate example of cognitive dissonance in action. And the reason this cycle repeats, the reason smart people ignore the statistical evidence is because the system itself is structurally rigged against the execution phase. Okay, so we need to move beyond the abstract failure rate and look at the physical and chemical mechanism that sabotage our best intentions. Let's stop blaming the person and zoom in to the actual programming errors inside the skull. We are moving into section 2, where we analyze the biological and psychological culprits that make resolution inherently brittle. Our internal investigation begins with a chemical deep dive. We are talking about the brain's reward system and how the very act of setting a resolution can immediately steal the fuel required to execute it. This is the neuroscience of goal setting gone wrong. We need to properly understand dopamine, which is frequently misunderstood as just a pleasure chemical. It's far more precise than that. It's more about motivation, is a molecule of motivation, of seeking, and crucially of anticipation. It dictates why we pursue things. Okay, so the concept we need to master here is reward prediction error, or RPE. It's what happens when the brain compares the reward it expected versus the reward it actually received. And for the resolution, the mouse goes horribly wrong from the very beginning. Let's break down the mechanism. When you are sitting there writing the list on December 31st, your prefrontal cortex is engaged in the powerful visualization. You're simulating the future outcome, the rush of accomplishment, the improved health, the fluency in the new language. You're seeing the movie in your head. You're seeing the movie, and this robust simulation, this high expectation of reward causes a massive, immediate surge of dopamine release. So just thinking about it feels good. It feels great. The brain is saying the goal is important, prepare to move, but critically, it's providing the chemical reward for the future event right now during the planning. You're getting paid up front. Think of it as a prepayment. You're sitting there perfectly comfortable, and your brain hands you the feeling of accomplishment. You feel the dopamine rush of success simply for imagining the success. You've been chemically rewarded for the potential without performing any of the necessary work. So fast forward, it's January 3rd. The alarm goes off at 6 a.m. and you lace up your shoes to go for the run. The brain is now logging the reality of the situation. It's cold, it's dark, your muscles are sore, you're tired, it's monotonous, it's awful. The actual reward from the first 20-minute run is tiny compared to the massive rush you got sitting on the couch and envisioning future me running a marathon effortlessly. And that gap, that's the reward prediction error. The massive discrepancy between the expected high reward, which was visualized success, and the actual low reward, the painful process. That is the reward prediction error in action. And when RPE is negative, meaning the actual reward is far lower than expected, the brain does something critical. It lowers the motivation signal for the specific behavior. It learns not to do it. The brain is efficient. It calculates. I can get a huge dopamine hit by sitting here and imagining the six pack, or I can get a tiny, painful negative RPE hit by getting up and running. I will choose the high dopamine, low effort path. The motivation has been stolen from the hard work to found the pleasant daydreamer. It's biological scam. It is. And it's a negative RPE cycle repeats. If you keep planning grand goals that only deliver pain during execution, the brain begins to associate the very idea of goal pursuit with disappointment and low reward. So you're training yourself to be less ambitious. In a way, yes, it can lead to a form of learned helplessness, with a desire to pursue grand goals actually decreases because the brain anticipates the subsequent low dopamine letdown. So, how do we fix the chemistry? How do we trick the brain to reward and execution instead of just desperation? The only way to fight RPE is to shift the goal from the large, abstract outcome, the ceiling, to the immediate, tangible process, the floor. We need to create instant, positive RPE during the execution phase. Small wins. Tiny wins making the action so small, so consistent that the brain registers a quick victory, a positive small dopamine hit every single time. The reward has to be tied to consistency of the effort, not to the scale of the outcome. We've detailed exactly how to structure this in the section 4. Okay, so the first culprit is the chemical thief in our planning phase. But even if we could maintain the motivation, the second major culprit is the structure of the goal itself, which it just shatters the moment we are humans. This moves us into behavioral psychology, specifically the work of researchers Janet Polywai and C.P. Herman. They coined a fantastic term for this, the what hell effect. They studied it initially in the context of dieting, but it's a universal psychological trap for any binary goal. And by binary, I mean all or nothing thinking. Resolutions are almost always framed as absolute perfect strikes, 100% competence or 100% failure. I will never miss a workout. I will never spend a dime on a purchase. I will meditate for 30 minutes every single day. There is no room for error. This approach establishes an unsustainable standard of perfection. We are structured the goal like a glass statue. It's beautiful, it's inspirational, and it's impossible to maintain. Human life involves friction, sickness, sudden travel, unexpected crisis, emotional lapses. A single mistake isn't just possible, it's inevitable. Let's use an example. Say your resolution is I will eat no sugar for entire months. Then on January 12th, you have a terrible day and you eat one cookie, just one. The binary system immediately collapses. The internal judge in your head says, you broke the rule. The perfect streak is over. You failed the entire resolution. And the mental cascade that follows is instantaneous. We've already failed. This system is destroyed. Might as well eat the whole box of cookies. Start fresh next month. That is the crucial self-destructive period. The single cookie provides the psychological permission to abandon all constraint and engage in extreme compensatory behavior, the blowout. The small lapse is cognitively amplified into total, irreversible failure. It's a resignation of responsibility rooted in imperfectionism. And what's fascinating is that the person doesn't stop because they run out of willpower. They stop because they believe the effort is now worthless. That's the key. All the previous days of disciplined eating can perceived as having been instantly negated by that one cookie. This cognitive distortion is highly reinforcing of eating behavior. If the goal were structured differently, say I allowed sugar on 28 days this month, that one cookie would just be a data point. It wouldn't shatter the entire system. But because resolutions are so often based on this fragile notion of a perfect streak, the brain uses the lapse as justification for total self-sabotage. The brittleness is why we need to move away from the goals made of glass towards protocols made of steel. We need systems that are resilient that account for the reality of the human inconsistency. We need an approach that views the inevitable slip up not as the end of a journey, but as a momentary bend in the road. And for that, we turn to one of the most extreme case studies in human resilience and discipline procedure. The time for respiration and fragility is over. We need a fix, a truly unbreakable standard of operating procedure. Let's pivot to section 3 and examine two vastly different approaches to tackling the most hostile environment on Earth, Antarctica. When trying to build a resilient protocol for personal change, we have to look at the situations where emotional state and external conditions are the most hostile, and it doesn't get much more hostile than Antarctica in 1911. Nothing tests the difference between the motivation and discipline quite like a race to the South Pole. The historical contest provides a perfect brutal metaphor for the resolution cycle versus the protocol. Okay, so one side we have Robert Falcon Scott, the resolution guy, on the other side, Roald Amundsen, the protocol guy. And their planning methods determine not just their success, but their survival. Let's start with the Scott. He was the quintessential heroic figure, passionate, brave, and relying heavily on the moral, the inspirational zeal of his team. His entire approach was based on maximizing performance when the conditions were perfect. Scott's fatal flaw was his reliance on variability. His team's progress was random. On days with favorable weather, light winds, and decent visibility, they would push themselves to utter exhaustion. They go all out. They would log huge distances, sometimes 50 or 60 kilometers, fueled by pure competitive drive and adrenaline. Scott saw this as banking distance, maximizing the good days, which sounds smart on the surface, but those massive bursts came at a huge cost: metabolic drain, unnecessary fatigue, and the wear and tear on their equipment. And crucially, Scott was relying heavily on man-hauling, using pure human strength to drag sledges of supplies and later ill-suited ponies. The whole system was dependent on heroism and brute force, which are unsustainable resources in that environment. And then, when the inevitable blizzards hit, when the temperatures dropped, or when the team was simply exhausted from the previous day's excessive push, Scott would stall. They'd wait in their tents, sometimes for days, waiting for the feeling of motivation to return or the weather to get better. They were relying on external conditions to dictate their internal state of action. And the consequence of that was absolute catastrophe. When the weather turned truly horrific on the return journey, they had no reserves left. Their energy was spent, their supplies were inadequate due to poor rationing, and they were geographically marooned, waiting for a good day that never arrived. Scott and his entire party perished, a momentum to the failure of emotional, high-stakes, variable effort. Now, let's analyze Roald Amundsen, Norwegian. Amundsen was the epitome of boring, meticulous procedure. His planning was rooted in data, conservation, and efficiency, not heroism. He stripped away all reliance on motivation and replaced it with a standardized process. What did that look like in practice? His preparation was astonishingly detail-oriented. He studied local people opting for light, fast dog sleds instead of man-hauling. He developed high-calorie, precisely rationed diets. He set up supply depots of exact measured intervals. His focus was entirely on controlling the variables he could control, and this brings us his defining rule, his standard operating procedure, which is the heart of the protocol we are installing, the 30-kilometer march, every single day. Every single day without fail, they march exactly 30 kilometers. No more, no less. That is the genius of the protocol. And the critical lesson for all of us, Amundsen knew that consistency hedges against the future. If you push up to 50 kilometers on a perfect day, He would be physically exhausted, his dogs would be fatigued, and his emotional capital would be drained, making the next day, the bad day, that much harder, nearly impossible to overcome. By stopping at 30 kilometers, he was doing three critical things. One, conserving reserves. They rested, repaired gear, and slept well, effectively banking physical and mental energy for the inevitable blizzards. 2. Standardizing routine. The consistency established an unbreakable mental rhythm. They knew exactly what to expect, minimizing the psychological friction of starting the next day. And 3. Preventing over-optimism. It neutralized the temptation to rely on fleeting inspiration. The goal wasn't to maximize the good day. The goal was to guarantee progress on the bad day. So the 30-kilometer march wasn't a ceiling, it was a non-negotiable floor. If a massive blizzard hit and the conditions was horrific, they still pushed for 30 kilometers. They leveraged the reserves they had conserved on the good days to maintain the minimum standard, regardless of pain or emotion. He removed the possibility of what the hell effect completely, because his goals were not predicted on perfection or feeling good, they were predicted on procedure. His success was boring, predictable, and ultimately life-saving. He planted the flag, returned safely, and achieved his objective by adopting a routine that was built to withstand chaos. So, if your annual resolution, the big, aspirational, often abandoned goal, is Robert Falcon's code, relying on motivation and perfect conditions, then the sustained, predictable success must be Roald Amundsen. It means replacing the volatile high-stakes goal with a rigid, boring, unsexy, and unbreakable protocol. The central lesson is clear. Consistency outperforms intensity every single time, especially in environments where it's Antarctica or the complexity of modern life that are inherently chaotic and unpredictable. Okay, we've identified the culprits: dopamine theft and brutal perfectionism. We've identified the solution model, the 30-kilometer march. It's time to translate this historical success into a modern operating procedure. The conclusion of this video is explicit. We are canceling the traditional New Year resolutions. We are throwing away the list of inspirational ceilings. Instead, we're installing a three-step standard operating procedure based on science and consistency and the history of survival. And this shift is foundational. We are moving the focus away from the distant, abstract outcome and placing it squarely on the immediate achievable action. We are redefining success as consistency over effort, which automatically counteracts the traps we are identified. Let's get into it. Step 1. Set a floor, not a ceiling. This is the core of the 30-kilometer march philosophy. A ceiling is that maximum, often intimidating target, like run a marathon, which creates immense pressure. If the ceiling is a marathon, every day that you don't do a massive workout feels like a failure. It activates that negative reward prediction error because the effort required is high and the instant reward is low. But the floor is non-negotiable, tiny daily action that ensures you keep the momentum. And the absolute most important rule for setting this floor is this: it must be so low, so trivially easy that if you fail to do it, you would feel genuinely stupid. So low it's embarrassing not to do it. The floor is designed to eliminate the activation energy required to start. Let's provide some specific examples for you across different domains. Say your goal is to write a novel or start a business. The ceiling is 80,000 words or a full business plan. The floor is: I will write one single sentence a day, or I will outline one bullet point. It takes 30 seconds, but it maintains the identity of a writer or an entrepreneur. Okay, what about fitness goal? Get physically fit, 6-pack abs. The ceiling is an hour at the gym. The floor is: I will perform one push-up and a one squat. The action is almost embarrassing in its simplicity, but it guarantees consistency. Finances. Goal: master my budget. Ceiling: balance the checkbook perfectly every week. Floor: I will check my bank account balance once, or I will log one expense. Learning a new language. Ceiling: fluency in 6 months. Floor: I will review one flashcard. The genius of the floor is that it leverages inertia. If I commit to one push-up when I'm already down there, I'll probably do 5. If I commit to reading one sentence, I often find myself reading a full chapter. But a psychological victory is secured the momentum you hit the trivial minimum, and the extra effort is a bonus. A delightful surge of positive RPE because the achievement exceeds the predicted tiny effort. And this is the profound shift in identity we were after. The purpose of the floor is not high output, the purpose is consistency. Amundsen's team wasn't trying to conquer the pole in a single day. They were proving to themselves through a relentless, predictable action that they were the type of people who marched 30 kilometers. By hitting your floor, you're affirming, I'm the type of person who reads, or I'm the type of person who exercises. This self-identity is the engine of the long-term change. The floor completely defeats the paralyzing pressure of massive goal. It ensures that even if your absolute worst day, you stick, exhausted, fighting a metaphorical blizzard, you can still perform the minimum action required to declare victory for the day. Okay, that's step 1, the floor. What's next? Step 2 is a safety net. It's a never miss twice rule. This is a structural countermeasure to what the hell effect. We acknowledge upfront that this system must be resilient enough to absorb human error. You are explicitly allowed to miss one day. We are building structural forgiveness into the process. Life happens. You'll get stuck at work, you'll get sick, you'll simply be too mentally drained to perform your floor action. A single lapse is an accident. It's not a justification for total abandonment. However, the boundary is absolute. You are never, ever allowed to miss 2 days in a row. Why is that second day so critical? Because missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new, undesirable habit. The brain learns incredibly fast to favor inaction if it's repeated. The psychological cost of missing twice is immense. If I skip my one push-up on Monday, that's an accident. If I skip it again on Tuesday, that's a choice. It's a choice, and you have now established a 2-day streak of non-action. Your brain recognizes that pattern of ease and begins integrating it into your routine. The habit building mechanism doesn't distinguish between good and bad habits. It simply reinforces repetition. So the never miss twice rule mandates a forced, immediate reset. If you miss your reading floor on Monday, you must read on Tuesday. You must. Even if your floor is one sentence, you read that one sentence. The purpose of this forced compliance isn't for literally gain, but purely to break the unwanted streak and reaffirm your core identity as a reader. It's a psychological insurance policy. If you miss Tuesday morning's workout, you must go Wednesday morning, even if it's 10 minutes of light stretching. You are performing the actions solely to prove to yourself that the identity of the person who quits is not your dominant operating identity. It completely eliminates the justification for the what the hell cascade, because the streak is never truly broken for more than 24 hours. This is resilience. We are moving away from the fragile perfection of the glass statue and adopting a structure that bends but never breaks. It's a system designed to tolerate failure as long as the failure is immediately corrected. Okay, that's a powerful one. The final step. Step 3 is the activator. Start today, also known as the Ulysses Pact or commitment device. Our final step addresses the widespread problem of procrastination, which is often masked as strategic planning, the Ulysses contract. This is a concept for mythology, actually. Ulysses had a sail past the sirens whose songs would lure sailors to the death. So he had his men tie him to the mast so he couldn't steer the ship towards them, no matter how tempted he was. He bound his future self to his desired behavior in the present. And this is where I directly challenge you. If you're currently saying, this protocol sounds great, I'll implement this on January 1st, by waiting for that arbitrary calendar date, you're proving that you are still beholden to the Scott model reliance on external fleeting inspiration. Waiting for January 1st is a form of self-sabotage. It delegates the hardest part, the momentum of starting, to the same future me who is going to be tired, busy, and unmotivated. You're setting yourself up for that negative RP failure all over again. The trap of the date proves you believe change requires perfect external alignment. A specific Monday, a new calendar year, a perfect set of circumstances. Amundsen didn't wait for the perfect day to start his 30-kilometer march. He started because the procedure demanded. So if you truly want to change, you have to prove to your brain that you are capable of immediate present action, regardless of the date on the calendar. Therefore, if this protocol resonates with you, you must implement the tiny floor action today. Not a big, ambitious start, just the floor. If your floor is logging one expense, do it the minute this video concludes. If your floor is one push-up, drop and do it now. This immediate physical action serves as the foundation. It breaks the inertia of planning and procrastination. And if you find your self-realization why you can't do the trivially simple floor right now, I'm too busy, I'm tired, I'll start Monday, that is the clearest possible evidence that the internal resistance to the massive goal would have been overwhelming anyway. This Ulysses Pact eliminates the psychological comfort of delay. You commit now, while your motivation is high, to an action that is so small that your tired future self cannot rationally argue against it. You bind yourself to the mast of consistency. Okay, let's bring this all together. We established the failure of the New Year's resolution system, the dopamine trap, the psychological bitterness, and we replaced it with the Amundsen protocol, the boring, unbreakable resilience structure for the 30-kilometer march. The true takeaway is shifting your focus from massive ambition to the daily adherence. Throw away the concept of resolution, the ceiling, and install the protocol, the flow. You are moving from violation of motivation to certainty of standardized procedure. I just want to be the old me who finally learned how to keep a promise. A simple, stupidly achievable promise. A promise that I hit every single day, building genuine, quiet confidence through relentless consistency. It's time to stop delegating responsibility for change to a calendar date. The evidence is overwhelming. Waiting for the perfection is fatal to progress. So, as you finish listening to this video, the final provocative thought I want to leave you with is this, demanded by the logic of your analysis. You cannot wait for the January 1st. Wait is the single minimum floor action for your 30-kilometer march. And what action can you take right now, this very minute, to prove to yourself that you're the person who keeps the promises? This is very important now. I know this video is not perfect. I was preparing for this for months, for years. This is true. And I was really never ready to post this video. So my example here is I better record this finally with what I can, how I can speak. I know that my pronunciation was not perfect, maybe my presentation was not perfect, but I just told myself that if I'm not doing it now, I will never do it. So this is my first video. This is the beginning of everything, and just my goal is to make every next video slightly better, 1% better than the previous one. So this is my foundation. This is my floor.